Do you know how many languages that exist in the entire world? There exist about 7,000 different languages, and half of them are dying really soon. UNESCO made an estimate that half of the world's languages are dying in a century's time. And in my home country, India, there are about 750 languages. Out of them, at least 240 languages died in the last 50 years. And here is a question: how do we save a language, and what we can do as individuals to save a language? A couple of years back, I started a project called Open Speaks. The project is now hosted at the O Foundation, a nonprofit that I co-founded with a couple of other friends. And Open Speaks is a project. It's an open and collaborative project where anyone can join, collaborate, and contribute to create open educational resources. And we call it an open toolkit. So this is the first step of designing open curriculum for preserving languages, for keeping languages alive for the next generation. So the first part of this is designing open toolkits. And what we mean by open toolkits is open toolkits open toolkits are divided into 4 different categories. The first one is open methodologies. So what we design is we try to create different methodologies that will fit into different situations. For example, if you know someone and you're connecting with them remotely, then you're calling them on Skype or something like that, and then recording those conversations and then digitizing that and making those recordings available with subtitles, with annotations, and so on. That's one particular kind of methodologies. So we design different methodologies that will fit into different situations so that people can use them. The second thing is open educational resources. So once you learn about how to or what you need to kind of record, then you need to learn how to do that. And not everyone is an archivist, so it's important that we provide enough information, what kind of software they have to use, and what kind of hardware they need, and so on. So people use different open educational resources that we develop. So when you go to the website, openspeaks.com, and you click on the Modules Multimedia Toolkit, it takes you to our toolkit page where you can see different modules. So we currently have 4 modules that covers 4 different areas. The first one is the basics of audiovisual recording and the interview process. The second one is hardware and software for recording and recording process. So basically to understand what kind of hardware and software you have to use for the recording process. And the third one is curating and publishing metadata, and editing audio, video, and publishing them in the fourth one. So let's talk about the module 1, basics of audiovisual recording. So basically it gives you an idea about the audiovisual recording process and how to go about it, and what you should consider while recording, and so on. So, here are a couple of examples how you can make the most of the process, what you should record, and also, what kind of problems you might expect and how to deal with them. So the interview process is pretty straightforward, and depending on your interviewee, you might change it a little bit, because this is kind of a standard template, but it doesn't really mean that you have to use it. So feel free to change those things that don't make sense or need some contextual or localization, and so on. The second one, the module 2, which is mostly about the hardware and software and the recording process in general. So there are a couple of examples here, and also situations. So if you're doing a recording in a home studio and calling someone over a telephone call or Skype call, then it'll be different than if you're meeting someone in a physical location. There are different examples, software that you should download. Same with video recording, different instructions about the camera, and how you do the recording using your smartphone, and so on. And the third module, which is curating and publishing metadata, is really important because metadata or those valuable information that are required for any non-native speakers to understand your archival. It's really important that you have enough of it, because most of your audience are going to be non-native speakers that are either researching about a different language or are trying to learn a new language, and so on. And unless you provide enough information in the audio-visual recording, it will be really hard for them to understand. So this is all about that. How do you create metadata? How do you create annotation? Or how do you create transcription? Or how do you add the subtitles to video and audio? There is an example here which we have done ourselves, and you can go to that page and look at that. That's another interesting aspect. So you get to see a real example of another digital documentation at the end of that, and everything could be downloadable, as you can see. At the end of that, there is the metadata, so you can find the detailed information. And I will also suggest you to add something like reading or bibliography, so other people that are learning about the language could get to read some research publications and so on. So going back to the module 3, so you get to learn about that. And in fact, we have copy pasted the Carby language, that the page that we just showed here, so you get to see how it looks like. The module 4 is about the audio and video editing and publishing them, and we have given a couple of resources here, suggestions what kind of formats you should use, and for both audio and video, what kind of apps you can use to for your phone if you're using the phone as an audio video recorder. Audacity, a free software for audio recording, editing, and publishing. It's something that we highly recommend, and we are trying to create tutorials like this particular one here, and we will add more of them in the future, so you can learn how to use Audacity. Audacity is a great software that we have been using for years. And again, for the video editing, you can use multiple software. We would recommend something like Kdenlive, which is a free software and it is available across different platforms. And once you're done with the editing part, you will need to publish your content. And so we suggest a couple of options, a couple of platforms which you can consider uploading your content at. But you can totally free to choose your own platform and hosting service. And again, the options that we have shared here are mostly free. So go through this, and this is a 4-day long module. So it will actually take a couple of hours if you're doing it for if you have already done recording anytime before. But to keep it more flexible, we have kept it a little longer. And most importantly, if you want to contribute back to this particular project and add something that you feel is valuable, then you can always go to our GitHub repository. So it's github.com/openspeaks. And once you go to our GitHub repository, you'll find these repositories inside that. So go to the OER and they will find the English version of this the repository, sorry, the OER that you just saw. And if you go inside that, and you'll see the entire documentation here. If you want to contribute, you can always click on edit this file. It'll create a forked version of this particular document, and once you see that, you can make changes, you can suggest changes, and then contribute back. And once you add that, we will verify that and add to the main repository. And finally, we'll take this from GitHub to the website. So it's pretty simple and straightforward if you already know how to use GitHub. And also you're more than welcome to translate this particular document into your language. And when you do that, you submit that by changing the name from en is basically for English, to your language. For example, if you're doing it in Spanish, that'll be es, or if it's French, then it'll be fr, and so on. So please feel free to do that. And once you do that, you can also spread the word among your friends, telling that, hey, I've translated this particular document. And if you're creating an audiovisual documentation for any language, you're more than welcome to use that. So help us spread the word around your friend circle and so on, and especially with people that are interested to do this kind of stuff. So this is my grandma. She's no longer with us, and when she was around, she used to tell me a lot of stories. So one day I sat down with her and I recorded her singing songs and telling me stories, and I captured all of that. Then I subtitled them. I made them available online. This is one of the very first documentations I personally did. So part of this project is supported by National Geographic, which is to capture and create audio visual archive for 2 or 3 languages. Those languages are endangered. They only have a few thousand speakers, and we are recording the native speakers' conversations and their stories, their songs, and so on. And then we're gonna create those archives with the annotations and metadata. Subtitles for the videos and audios, so anyone can learn about their indigenous culture and so on.
Hello, I'm Prateek, and I'll be talking to you about the next sections. The second thing we are going to talk about is digital preservation and reconstruction and recreation. Though these terms may seem to be the same, but they are not. Let us understand what each of these terms mean and how they differ from each other. The first thing we are going to talk about is called preservation. Digital preservation in most scenarios can be simply called digitization. Digitization is the process of converting something from a physical storage medium to digital storage, which often lasts much, much longer and therefore has a preservatory effect on whatever you are digitizing. Things that can be digitized include books and archives, which can be scanned, and we also have music. Take, for example, a YouTube channel that brings out old gramophone records and extracts the audio from them, converts them into digital audio, that is, digitizes them, and then releases them online. There is indeed such a channel which has released some 250 odd gramophone records from 1905 to 1950. Think of the consequences it can have. People have been exposed to an entirely different kind of music, something to which they have never been exposed before. We can trace the evolution of music over a time period, all this thanks to digitization. We can extend the same to cinema, which is another important part. The three of these combined together, with many other major and minor factors, form the entirety of the culture surrounding a language. This brings us to an important rule. While documenting a language, do not ever forget the culture that surrounds the language. A language without its culture is essentially sapless. The next thing is to recognize what you have and what you do not have. Recognize that you may have stuff that is worthy of preservation, that deserves digitization. In such an instance, do not miss out a chance. In India, we have many households that possess ancestral manuscripts. However, most of these people are not aware of how to digitize them and that these things should be digitized. And that brings us to the third and most important rule. Expensive gear is not mandatory, is not necessary for you to become a digitization expert. You can be an archivist with your regular smartphone. If there's something that's certainly better than nothing, if you can preserve a part, at least you have what you have. You have not lost what you wanted to preserve entirely. Next, we come to reconstruction. As a case study, we studied the example of Odia Wiktionary. Wiktionary is a sister project of Wikipedia, which comes under the Wikimedia Foundation, which aims at building an open dictionary for all languages of the world. By reconstruction, we mean reconstructing existing knowledge for the internet, building some existing concept or idea and transferring it to a digital form. In the Odia Wiktionary, they took seven hardbound, out of print classic volumes of a lexicon known as the Purnachandra Odia Bhashakosha and they turned it into a searchable online dictionary with pronunciations, with added things, with multilingual transliteration scripts. This makes knowledge far more accessible to more people. It becomes more practical at the same time. It is not possible for an ordinary person to possess seven hardbound volumes of a rare out of print lexicon. Most of the libraries in the state do not have all the seven volumes, only the older ones do possess it. In such a situation, think of how redeeming it can be for the same knowledge to land in the hands of everyone. In such a situation, each individual is able to appreciate whatever knowledge has been documented and is already freely available. The last thing we come to is digital recreation. Recreation means recreating ideas and concepts for a digital medium with an online audience in mind. This is when you build something bottom up with the internet in mind. We take the case of one of my projects, which I call Project Pothi. The website is projectpothi.org. I started this project because I could not find several rare and ancient literary works of the Odia language. I found that these books were out of print since the last 5 or 6 decades, and I could find no trace of many of those names anywhere. So I started collecting them from libraries, from individuals, and from wherever I could. I looked into my own household, I found a lot of them, and then I scanned all of them. I released them online for free. But the thing is, we do not stop here. We go on because most of this is musical literary. I tried to collect recordings, I tried to collect the living tradition of how they are being sung. I began collecting them from the gramophone guy I told you about. I got ancient renditions of the same songs, and now we can build an evolutionary map of how the music has evolved over the years and how the lyrics vary from location to location, how there are discrepancies between different manuscripts, how the vocabulary has evolved over the years, how parts of other languages have seeped in through regional culture, how we can annotate all of this in an interactive online archive so that this knowledge gets across to everyone. This led to a site being built which has all of these features and more indeed. And this was an example of books, old, tattered, torn books that were lying around in the racks of libraries, never being read by anyone, into a digital website that has made literature, especially classic ancient literature, far more accessible for people. The third thing we come across is public engagement. For a language to survive, that there be a living tradition of it being spoken is far more important than whatever I have spoken till now. You need to interact in a language to keep it alive. You need to talk in the language. You need to write in the language. You need to read in the language. But when we think of all of this in a digital context, we come to social media. Social media, including Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, Instagram, whatever, is huge. You may not realize it, but many people hesitate in posting or tweeting in their native language because simply because there are not many people doing that around them. Once you start doing such a thing, you'll be surprised at how many people are indeed interested because a mother tongue is obviously the best way you can express yourselves. Moreover, there should be no standard of the internet, even though that is the sad truth that English is the leader, whereas most languages are underrepresented, especially those that do not have access to the internet. With these languages comes the wealth of idioms, expressions, and cultural connotations weaved in them. With each language, we find another culture. So, you cannot just transpose everything from one language to another. Once you shift to a language, you'll find more and more people replying to your threads in your native language. Other ways of doing this are blogs, podcasts, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, audiovisual documentation is an extremely important part of how you can document a language. Consider a language that has a very limited number of speakers. Suppose you live in the vicinity of one of them. Try recording those. Try recording them in your mobile device or on a professional setup. When you do so, you have access to huge video sharing platforms like YouTube, and you can subtitle them into English. This makes the knowledge open for everyone. One need not know the language. At the same time, try to subtitle it in the language it is originally in, it is spoken in. When you do that, one has the possibility of retracing the language, trying to understand how it was spoken even after many years, provided that he or she knows the script. For an example of that, Subhashish must have talked to you about his grandma. Subhashish recorded a clip of her sharing about ancient songs of Odisha that are the weepings of a bride who leaves her parents' home after marriage. And due to this, she weeps out. She weeps out in lament. And during this, there are traditional songs that they sing. And this tradition is dying out in Odisha nowadays because uh, these songs were traditionally passed down from the women of the family, from the elderly women of the family to the girls, and it is stopped nowadays. With such a scenario, for someone of the newer generation to know about these songs would be very difficult without an example. But what Shabashish's grandma told is a very lively way of getting to know about the idea. With this, the subtitles that he has given, it becomes far more easier to understand what she is saying and how she is saying, uh, and how she is trying to convey the idea. With her, we may have lost her, but we have regained certainly a tiny but significant part of her knowledge. Then we come to talks and events, which are physical platforms to get across to more and more people. At this, I would point you to Subhashish's TEDx talk, Would You Let a Language Die? Here's the link. Do watch it. At last, we come to memes. Memes are certainly the most important thing of all of this. I say it not out of humor, but when you look at a meme is very culture specific. For example, the memes that you see in English nowadays would make absolutely no sense someone who is based in a village in India and has no idea about English culture. Memes are very specific about pop culture, especially about movies, television shows, games, and the like. When you transpose the entire thing into another perspective, into another linguistic sphere, it would absolutely make no sense, because the cultural surrounding, the pop culture around each language being different, the context is lost. And so, when you face the challenge of creating a meme in your native language, it is certainly a daunting task. But once you crack it, you'll realize that many people are indeed interested in the meme game. When you notice this, memes become viral. I'll give you an example. Before 2 or 3 years, someone took the villain's dialogue, a very powerful dialogue, from a folk theatre in Odisha that was especially popular during the time. But what he did with that was amusing. He took the talking tom app that animates a cat's character speaking what you speak. It records the audio and then places it on the animation. And he did that with the audio, and certainly it became somehow funny, and people began liking it. For the next couple of months, everyone was trying to type it using hashtags, but they did not know how to type in Odia. And for the very purpose of being able to type the hashtag, they began copying it, they began searching for it, they began asking people how they could type it. So, and that led to an overall increase in the amount of memes in Odia and the amount of content in Odia. You can certainly say that it was a more interactive thread than normal ones. Creating a meme is another game by itself, but you should know that pop culture references draw attention and they can indeed be life saving for languages. When you realize how to join all of these pieces together in order to strategically promote your chosen language, you'll realize the power of social media in almost every circumstance, especially for the problem that we are trying to solve. Over to Subhashish.
A lot of content that we create are in native languages, so we try to create a lot of metadata, that as I explained before. And one of the reasons that we do that is because we also want to make this content available to everyone. And digital accessibility is another important aspect, and that's something that we have to keep in mind, that a lot of people in the world are unable to view. So you have to create content that are accessible to everyone. Accessibility is very important, and we try to create our content in a manner that it could be used to create accessibility software. We have a project called Katabidana. It was created some time back by forking an existing open source software which was created by a Tamil language Wikimedian called T. Srinivasan. And so what we did is we forked his software, we made some changes, and then we kind of customized some of the features to create a workflow so that anyone can record a long list of words or phrases in their language. It's a great tool for all the Linux and Mac users, particularly, to kind of record words or phrases in their language. And we're trying to create open educational resources and tutorials. We're trying to create tutorials for them so that those software could be used as well for recording and making digital archive, making audio archive particularly. And the content that are created from them are used to create text-to-speech and speech-to-text software, so that the content could be available for people with disability, people with blindness. Thank you so much. We're really grateful to all of you for listening to us.